Hi guys, and welcome to At Home with Elisa. I wanted to discuss something with you. I wanted to try and keep YouTube to be, perfectly pretty and everything's all manicured, and life just isn't like that, and I want this to be real. So today's video is a little bit different. It is basically covering an event that has happened here on our property when we moved here, and it's not all upbeat. It is a bit upsetting, to be honest, a bit traumatic to discuss, so I've been putting off doing this video, but I want to keep it real, so here we go. So we live in New South Wales in Australia. So far this year we have had 1200 millimeters of rain, which is we've had over that actually. We reached 1200 millimeters of rain, which is usually our yearly total, and we reached that within the first 4 months of the year, a few days into the first 4 months, so almost 3 months, and we have clocked over our yearly rainfall average. New South Wales and Queensland have had excessive rain, flooding, landslides. There's been whole towns that have been wiped out. So many people have lost their homes. As I said, just towns, streets after streets have been wiped out. There's been people that have lost their lives. I'm not sure what the current tally is, but I know it's well over 20, maybe 30. Property was definitely affected by rain. We were very lucky when we consider things. It could have been a lot worse, but we were very lucky. But I just wanted to tell our story as well. So as I mentioned, we have had a lot of rainfall in those first couple of months of this year. We have got some, the ground is severely waterlogged. I didn't think that it could actually take any more. And because the ground was so waterlogged, we had a rather large, well, I wouldn't call it a storm, but it was some heavy rainfall, and it was very fast rainfall, which led to flash flooding in our local area. So I wanted to try and cover and show some of that footage of that day. Even though today looks beautiful, these days are few and far between. Last week alone, I think we had another, what did we get, close to 200 millimeters of rain last week alone, which is obviously a lot of rain. The ground can't handle it, and I wanted to cover some of the damage that we have had here, but specifically the one event. So on this particular day in February, it was just a normal day. Everybody was heading off to work. I drive our children to school every morning and pick them up, and this one day I was driving to school, and thankfully I just had the one child in the car, the other one had gone with dad, and we were driving to school, and when we left it was raining heavy, but when we were driving, it's only a 10-minute drive there and then a 10-minute drive back, but when we were actually driving there, I should have stopped. I should have stopped, turned around and come back. It was raining that hard that everything was just white. I was driving, everything was white in front of me. We couldn't actually see more than 2 cars in front of us at the time. However, we have so many large gum trees around here. I was really worried that if I tried to pull over and stop, that then trees fall in heavy rain, especially when the ground's so sodden. So I was really worried about actually pulling over and stopping, because it is just such a lush area around here. Our property is quite cleared compared to most of the streets and area around here. So I was worried about pulling over, so I thought, no, I'll just keep going. I've got to get her to school. It'll be fine. It'll stop in a second. It didn't stop. So anyway, I had my 6-year-old in the back of the car co-piloting, helping to work out, okay, slow down, there's a corner coming. We were trying to stay on the road. The roads were that crazy that you could actually, 2 lanes, you could only drive right in the middle, because both sides of the road had that much flooding in them that the gutters just couldn't handle it. There was big meter trenches on either side of the road, and they were so overflown that it was actually only leaving you with a certain area that you were able to drive down the center of a 2-lane road. So it was quite intense getting her to school. We managed to get her to school. Thankfully it's only 10 minutes away, so we got her to school, and on the way back it was quite scary. I aquaplaned, I believe what it's called, where the car starts to slide out from underneath you. So that was a little bit scary, I must admit. That's probably the scariest drive I've ever had in my life. I got home and I was a little bit shaken up, because I wasn't driving my car, I was actually driving my mum's car, so a little bit of a foreign car as well, and I'm not the most confident of drivers, shall we say. I got back home and I was like, oh, that was a bit scary, and I was so grateful to be coming down our street. And then when I came down to our driveway, I saw this. So this is the video that I took. I actually took it to show my husband because I didn't think he'd believe the amount of rain that we were having, and that the front of our property was actually overflowing. So we have about a 1 meter trench. It's a gully. It runs all the way along right up to the top of the hill here, and we have about 4 or 5 properties that actually overflow into that gully, and that travels down around to a catchment that we have on our property, which I'll show you shortly. The catchment contains all of the water, and it slowly disperses it out some pipes which are down on our property as well. It's in an effort to try and slow rainfall. But because we had so much rain that was coming down, the gullies out the front were overflowing, and they were actually overflowing, and they took out a lot of our parking area that we have out the front of our property. And we have our large container that stores all our actual furniture in it, and it actually has huge big holes underneath now from where the driveway has given way, and the water had come through with such force it's pushed all the rocks and sandstone all the way through underneath the container and out the other side. So that was quite amazing. As I was driving across our little man-made driveway, I also got some footage of some water runoff from the property next door. They recently just put in a temporary driveway themselves because they knew that all this weather was coming, and they're trying to hopefully start building shortly. And I got some footage as well of the runoff that was actually coming from their property and going all the way through right down towards our chicken coop and our garden area, which is the lowest point on our property. So at this point I just quickly parked and I ran up here onto our deck, and I just couldn't believe the amount of rain and how hard and fast the rain was coming down. It was quite a scene. I was standing here just taking footage of everything overflowing, all the berms. We put a berm in along this side of our property, which is a big trench. We dug a big trench there to try and stop trying to funnel water down to the back, just so that we weren't getting any excess water. And they all overflowed. They broke their banks, they overflowed, and I got some video of that. And as I was spanning around and I videoed down to the garden and down to the chicken coop, I could actually see, I think it just dawned on me all of a sudden that chickens can't swim. I know that's crazy, but I just remember thinking, chickens can't swim. And then I said something else, which I can't repeat right now. I took my glasses off. I wear glasses. I took my glasses off, I took my hat off, and I just ran down there as fast as I could. By the time I got down to the chickens, we have a huge chicken coop that's divided into two. We have our larger breeds on one side, which they were fine. I could see they were fine, but our little bantams are on the other side of the coop. And by the time I got down there, I saw things floating around, and I straight away panicked. Like, I didn't have my glasses on. I straight away panicked, and I thought that we had lost some of our chickens in this flash flooding. Thankfully, once I got a little bit closer, I realized that it was just the straw had clumped together. The whole chicken coop in that area there for them little girls is probably about 4 by 5 meters. They were left with an area the size of 1 foot by 1 foot. Half the chickens were upstairs. They'd made it up into the roost. There was about 4 or 5 chickens that were down below their roost where they sleep at night time. They were stuck on this 1 foot by 1 foot. Thankfully it was a little raised area, and they'd managed to huddle together there, but they couldn't actually get up into their roost because the ramp was actually underwater. So it was probably about 1 foot of water. Those little girls they're not very big at all. Bantams are very small types of chickens. I ran in there, and I really manhandled them because I was panicking, and I just grabbed them and I just shoved them up into the roost, and I was just picking chickens and shoving them up into the roost, up where they were higher. I knew they were above the water, they were safe in there. I locked them in there with some water, and then kind of had a little bit of a panic attack because I was like, my goodness, we could have just wiped out our whole chicken flock. And these chickens, we actually we've had them since they were 2 days old, so they're definitely members of our family and much loved by our children and us. It's quite a scary situation. So after that, I made sure that they were safe. I checked on the big girls as well. I looked at the garden, and it was just overflowing and everything was washing away, and I was like, okay, the garden, I can deal with the garden. The chickens' lives are okay. We're good. So after I'd stopped panicking and realized that the chickens were actually okay, they were going to be okay as long as the catchment didn't rise any further, I knew that they were okay, so I came back up here to the deck and I dried myself off a bit, and I walked inside the house, and our tiny homes are not only tiny, but they are not completely waterproof. So when I walked into our house, there was water everywhere, absolutely everywhere. Every single room had about that much water through it. There was only the section near the door that didn't have any water in it, and strangely enough the bathroom didn't have water in it. So at that point I kind of lost my mind a little bit. I rang my husband just for, I thought maybe I'll ring him for strength, because you know, he'll be like, it's okay, like you'll be right, clean up, it'll be fine. I rang my husband and I fell to pieces completely. I mean, like sobbing, ugly cry. It was not good. It was not a pretty situation for him to have to deal with. And I didn't stop crying for about 15 minutes, so I didn't even start cleaning it up. I was just a mess. It was just all too much for me. My husband was lucky enough to be able to come home. He came home and helped me clean up. We went through every towel, mop, everything. It was all soaked. We managed to get the house reasonably clean. We rushed out, I think 2 days later, and bought a dehumidifier for our house, just because we were worried about mold damage. We're actually in the industry, that's our business, is mold remediation and removal. We were really worried about mold. It turns out that I think we're probably going to lose our lamb. Thankfully we managed to get everything cleaned up in time for the kids to return home. Our other tiny home had flooded as well. We were cleaning up the two properties, and obviously doing regular checks on the chickens to make sure that they were safe. I was able to them down a little bit later in the day. I think after an hour or two the water had subsided quite a bit, and I was able to let the girls down so that they could obviously, you know, scratch around and not be locked in a roost all day. Thankfully that happened. I did get lots of footage of the aftermath as well. I'll show, I've got a footage actually of just a couple of hours after the morning's flood event. It was still very, very wet. The catchment was still overflowing, but thankfully everyone was safe. When I was actually down in the vegetable garden, I was able to hear water roaring. You know, like if you stand beside a waterfall, you can actually hear water roaring, like it makes that real roar sound. I could hear water roaring, one, because the property next to us actually has what I'm assuming is quite a large creek. They actually have quite a large creek there, and it was roaring from that side. But I was standing in our vegetable garden, I could hear something coming from the other side. And when I went to investigate, we have a small creek that runs from the next door neighbour's property down to ours, and it sort of tracks through a gully that goes all the way through into a dam that we have at the back of the property. If I can find some footage. And we had just recently lined it all with rather large sandstone boulders, and we made it look really nice, and trying to sort of work on ways to dig the gully quite deep so that then it would slow the water down and wouldn't rush across the land. So we dug something out about the size of probably about a Mini Cooper. We dug that out, and thinking that it would slow the water as it came through. It didn't. It just brought a whole lot of sand and dirt, and it filled the whole hole in completely. And every one of those pebbles, the tons and tons of stones that we had actually been pushed into our dam. There's a bee. We have native bees here, and they get a little bit too friendly sometimes. So New South Wales has been on flood watch for on and off for weeks. I think last week was the last flood watch that they had, and thankfully we didn't flood again. We have since made efforts to waterproof our tiny homes. We used silicone originally, we used cork, we used spray adhesive, which is like a spray sealant. That didn't work. None of those have worked. So we had a few days of sun probably about a week ago, and I actually got some waterproofing agent that you use for showers, and I was able to waterproof around the very bottoms of the tiny homes on the inside where they were leaking. And I only have 2 small leaks, so in last week's really quite heavy rain we only had like I think 2 puddles about that big. So a vast improvement on what we had previously. Step by step we're getting a little bit better, but it just takes time, and I think getting to know the property and getting to know the houses as well. After that first initial rain event, we were on flood watch for probably, I think, another week and a half. It was quite the ordeal. It was quite scary actually. Anxiety levels were an all-time high, just because we weren't able to keep everything dry and keep everyone safe. So I think our children actually had a few days off school as well, just because we weren't sure. The youngest one, I didn't want to drive her to and from school. The middle one, we weren't sure if he would be able to help us. We ended up involving the SCS, and we got some sandbags from local sandbag depots that we were able to go and collect. They also gave us some rather large black plastic tarping that I think I have video, actually I'll show you. We have video where we installed all the tarping to try and limit the amount of water, because we were on flood watch of heavy rain again. We were trying to limit the amount of water that could get into the Bantam's coop. So we were able to do that, and that has held up. It is definitely not perfect, but it has helped a great deal. We also went and purchased gumboots for every member of the family. We now all own gumboots. So we've got all our gumboots, and I just remember thinking, like, what have I done? What have I done? I've moved our family here, not just myself, but my husband as well. We've moved our family here. We had another house. The bees, the native bees today are insane. They keep buzzing around. We had our last property was a beautiful residential property, and we never had any problems with flooding. The street, other end of the street flooded, but not impacting houses. And here we'd moved here, so it was quite a scary time. It was quite upsetting. I was like, what have we done? I mean, obviously at those times we're obviously very high stress levels. It was scary. We weren't sure what was going to happen. We got through it, and we obviously love it here. It is definitely a decision that we still love, that we live here. We love it every day. Just during those really high flooding levels, you know, sometimes it can be a little bit more stressful than we would want. After about a week or so, we had the imminent threat of the danger. You know, the news had stopped blasting it quite as much, that, you know, we had to be cautious, and that it was a really bad flooding situation. It was not quite as bad. It was still raining, but it wasn't flash flooding alert kind of thing. So I did take some footage down in the vegetable garden and in the chickens area, just to sort of document. I wanted to document it because I want to be able to improve. Like, I doubt that this sort of situation is ever going to happen again, but I think it exposed some weaknesses in the garden and some weaknesses in the chicken coop. So we have decided to elevate our chicken coop. We decided to use big H4 sleepers. So sleepers are about 30 centimeters high, about that high, and we should be able to elevate our whole coop itself and then backfill with sand. That will help, one, by having the big bracing around of the wood the whole way around the chicken coop. That will help that, and also the sand inside will actually help with any drainage. So if by chance we do get any crazy weather, hopefully the girls will be a little bit higher and it will protect them a little bit more. So that's the plan going forward for the chickens. As for the garden, some of the gardens that we had actually had a river running through them. So there was one garden in particular that has my dahlias and had sunflowers in it, and it actually was under about 10 centimeters of water at the peak flood. So 10 centimeters of water was just sheeting across the whole top of the garden. So I realized that in future I'll take my dahlias out of there, and I will only put seed crops in that one garden, because it obviously is a little bit lower in that one section. And going forward, we haven't quite finished building the whole vegetable garden the way that I'd like it. So going forward, we're looking at doing raised garden beds only, just because we know then that they will be safe. So anything that I put in there will be safe, and we'll be able to use those and not have to worry about them flooding should something like this happen again. The very back garden bed that I had planned to put in, which I hadn't actually put in, I was planning to do an in-ground garden bed then with a huge big bean teepee. However, I won't be doing that now. I'm going to do a raised bed again, just to make sure that if I do invest time and money in doing it, I don't want to have to deal with it flooding again. It's too much. You don't want to do something and then have it all washed away. So going forward, that's the plan, is to stick with in-ground garden beds. And we did make some notes as well that we think will be able to help the property in general. We decided that we were going to put like a raised, quite a raised, about a foot high garden bed around the whole very front of our garden. Any rain that comes down the slope, it will actually stop it or slow it. We do have a little berm, which is what that's called. We do have a slight berm around the back of our little house here, and we noticed that that really worked with such heavy rainfall. All the water actually just still diverted around that berm. So that's what we're hoping to put in front of our garden bed, so that then hopefully in future it will limit the amount of rainwater runoff in a flash flooding event again. So it's definitely been a crazy ride the last month or so here. The weather's beautiful. We really hope that it sticks around like this. The property is still very, very muddy. You can't step off this deck without wearing gumboots, and that's one of the reasons why my videos have been deck orientated. I would love to get down and do some footage in the garden, but I'm a little bit hesitant to do it as yet, because I'm worried that if I do go and redo all my garden beds, that we're going to get another flash flood and it's just going to wipe all that work away. So it was just a bit too traumatic to deal with it to begin with. But we're getting there, and hopefully, you know, hopefully it'll be a lot better and we can actually start to get some work done in the garden again, because that's what this whole YouTube is actually, for me, is supposed to be about, you know, our gardening, our landscaping, our houses and our journey here. So that's why I wanted to cover this situation, even though it's not a normal situation that we would hopefully want to ever cover again on a YouTube channel. No, thank you. We're done now. So hopefully that's the end of it for us. Time will tell. I believe that the La Nina is supposed to stick around for another couple of months, so fingers crossed it doesn't get absolutely crazy like it has. We just need those periods of sunshine to be able to dry out a little bit, because the ground is so wet. So fingers crossed we do have those. So thanks very much for bearing with me while I talk about our flooding, and we're just deck orientated for footage. I'm hoping to do a property tour. I figure I've just got to keep this real, and the property is not perfect. Thankfully we were able to get a little bit of mowing done, not all of it, but we were able to get some done. So I'm hoping to do a property tour maybe in the next week or so. So hopefully we can get down off this deck and do some actual real footage for YouTube. That's my goals anyway. Thank you so much for listening to me. Please like and subscribe, and I will be posting again very shortly. Thank you so much. Bye.